Okay. Shall we start? Hey everybody, we're live and in stereo. So today we're gonna do questions for rate of reactions. Rate of reaction questions, everybody. Rate of reactions. Let's see how many questions we can cover. Here we go. That's my beautiful face. Let's start off with the first question. Please take out your booklets and take out rate of reactions in your booklets. I think tomorrow we should do reversible reaction questions, right? Every weekend we can do a lot of questions if you guys bear with me. Okay, let's start. So let me also check whether the mic is connected because we have to see that. Okay, that's Gucci. So the mic is connected. Chalo. So question number one says, aqueous hydrogen peroxide slowly forms water and oxygen at room temperature and pressure. Okay, it forms H2O and it forms your beautiful O2 at room temperature and pressure. The reaction is catalyzed by magnesium oxide. What does a catalyst do to the rate of reaction? What does a catalyst do to the rate of reaction? Walaikum assalam. Let me disable the waiting room. Okay. What does a catalyst do to the rate of reaction? Come on. This is rate of reaction topical. So we're going to think from the perspective of rate of reaction. What does a catalyst do? It speeds up the chemical reaction. It increases the rate of reaction. Why? Because it lowers the activation energy, right? And it takes part in the reaction, but it does not get used up. Okay, and it says the equation is shown. So he's given you hydrogen peroxide is basically converting into water and oxygen. Now it's saying a student investigates the rate of formation of oxygen gas when manganese oxide is added to aqueous hydrogen peroxide. Well, for the ATP perspective, let's think from the ATP perspective. How would he calculate the rate? You have a gas forming. So what can you do? Remember that entire ATP experiment? So if this were an ATP question and they were asking you to design an experiment, you could, just chopify that experiment that I've taught you when we were doing ATP question. Okay, but he's not asking you about the experiment. He's saying the volume of oxygen gas formed is measured at regular time intervals. The results are plotted onto graph. Now, what can you see here? Look at this. If I draw like, tangents here, what is visible to you guys? What is visible? You realize that, initially the rate of reaction is maximum. Why is initially the rate of reaction maximum? Because you have maximum amount of reactants, which mean what? If you have maximum amount of reactions, you know that there will be more concentration of reactant particles, and more concentration of reactant particles would mean there will be more frequent collisions, and more frequent collisions mean that the total effective collisions will increase and the rate of reaction would increase. So initially you have maximum rate of reaction. Why does the rate of reaction decrease as with respect to time? Why is it highest here but it's decreasing? Because the reactants start to get used up, and when they start to get used up, what happens? The concentration of reactant particles decreases. Remember the people experiment that I give you, the people analogy when I was talking about people cutting trees, remember? So the reactants are going to get used up as time takes place because products start to form, right? So when the reactants get used up slowly and gradually, the concentration of reactants starts to decrease, right? The concentration of reactant particles, the H2O particles in this case, would start to decrease, and that would mean less frequent collisions, and less frequent collisions would mean that the total effective collisions would decrease, and therefore the rate of reactions start to decrease. And why does it become zero? Why does the rate of reaction become zero? Because all the reactants are used up. So no more effective collisions, no more frequent collisions, and therefore the rate of reaction is zero. Get it? We've done this entire graph, right? So if you look at the question, he's saying state how graph 4.1 shows the rate of reaction at time 2 is lower than the rate of reaction at time 3. How does it show? Look at this. The gradient at time 1 is greater or lower? The gradient at time 1 is greater than time 2 or lower than time 3. So you realize if you draw tangent, this tangent is steeper, which means the steeper the tangent, the higher the gradient. So at time 1, the gradient is higher. That would mean that the rate of reaction is higher because, and how do you know that the gradient is higher? From your tangent, right? So how does it show that time 2 is lower? It is lower because the gradient at time 2 is lower. And how do you know that the gradient at time 2 is lower? Because you've drawn a tangent, and you know the less steep the tangent is, or the flatter the tangent, the lower the gradient. And the lower the gradient would mean the lower rate of reaction. Why? Because gradient is going to give you the change in volume of oxygen with respect to time, which is basically rate of reaction, right? We've done rate of reaction is what? It's the change in amount of reactants or products with respect to time. So the gradient is actually giving you the change in amount of products with respect to time. So the gradient at time 2 is lower, which means that the rate of reaction, which is indicated that the rate of reaction at time 2 is lower. How do you know that the gradient is lower? From my beautiful tangent, right? But I'm not going to talk about tangent. I'll just say, hey, it has a lower gradient at T2 versus T1, T1, right? So there's the gradient is lower at it, or you could say the gradient is lower at, instead of saying this, we could fix our English a little bit and we could say the gradient is lower at T2, then relative versus T1. And if the exam, why am I writing to T1? Okay, and if the examiner says, how do you know that the gradient at T2 is lower than T1? This question has never come. But if the examiner says, God forbid, he says, how do you know that the gradient at T2 is lower than the gradient at T1? Because the tangent is flatter, or the tangent is less steep at T2 relative to T1, right? Okay. And less steep ka matlab ye hai na, if it is less steep, the change in y-axis is going to, so the numerator decreases, right? The change in y-axis decreases, the numerator decreases, so the gradient that you get is lower. Maths. Explain using collision theory why rate of reaction at T2 is lower than at T1. We've already discussed it. Why is it lower at T2 than T1? Because at T2, now the H2O particles, the reactant particles, the concentration of H2O2 particles decreases or increases? Concentration is decreasing or increasing? Come on. The concentration of H2O2 particles, the reactant particles are decreasing or increasing. Are they being used up, or are they being formed? Obviously, H2O2 particles are being used up. The concentration of H2O particles is decreasing. So I could say, hey, the conc of H2O2 particles decreases. And what happens if the concentration of H2O2 particles decreases? What happens? Come on. What happens if the concentration of H2O2 particles decreases? This is all the tree analogy. Yes, this would mean the frequency, and therefore the frequency of collisions decreases. And you could add a third point, which is very crucial. It's your choice to add it or not, but I'd recommend to add it, which is what? Therefore, the total effective or the total successful collisions decrease. And thus rate of reaction is lower. Achha, do I need to write thus rate of reaction is lower at T2? No, because the examiner is already saying why is the rate of reaction lower at T2. So I'm just giving the answer to it. I don't need to write it. And thus this, right? Done. On figure 4.1, sketch the graph obtained when the experiment is repeated using aqueous hydrogen peroxide at higher temperature. So and all the other conditions remain the same. Now, if it's at a higher temperature, what should happen to the rate of reaction? Higher temperature means what? Higher temperature means higher kinetic energy. Higher kinetic energy means that, more frequent collisions. And higher kinetic energy also means something else. Higher kinetic energy means more frequent collisions, and it also means something else. More percentage of particles now have, or more proportion of particles have energy equal to or greater than the EA. Yeah. So it means two things. So how do I draw this? Well, obviously the graph should be more steep, right? And where should it end? Should I make more products, or should the products be the same? Should I make more products? The reaction should finish early, It should be something like this. Let me just fix it with the help of the eraser. Let's fix it, Let's fix it like this. So should it affect the products being formed? Should it affect the products being formed? Should temperature affect the products being formed? No, because you realize that product depends on quantity. Increasing the temperature only increases the rate of reaction. Why does it increase the rate of reaction? Because two things: increases the temperature, increases the kinetic energy of particles, more frequent collisions, and more percentage of particles have energy greater to or equal than the EA. And that is why if you double the temperature, the rate of reaction increases by more than double, or the rate of reaction doubles. Yes, the rate of reaction increases by more than double. Thank you. Right? So it does two things, and therefore the total effective collisions increases. Now, why does this have 2 marks? It has 2 marks because 1 mark is for showing that it has a higher rate of reaction, in which you've shown, this reaction, your reaction ends early, and it has a steeper curve to it. And the second mark is for showing that the volume of oxygen gas produced would not change. It will remain the same. Done. So you get 2 marks. Muft ke marks. Easy peasy lemon squeezing. This writing is so pathetic. I need to fix my writing, man. I literally need to fix my writing. Done, sir. Done, sir. Okay. Tetrachloro, bullshit, right? Sorry, my bad. Bad. Tetrachloromethane gas, you'll learn this in organic chemistry. Reacts with steam as shown below. The reaction is reversible. The forward reaction is exo. If the forward is exo, the backward should be endo, right? And it says, state what happens, if anything, to the rate of forward reaction if the concentration. Okay, tell me something. When I'm talking about rate, I've taught you guys this in reversible reaction. When I'm talking about rate, does it matter if I talk about the forward reaction and backward reaction? Does it matter whether you're talking about the forward reaction or the backward reaction, or is it connected to collision theory? Is rate connected to collision theory, or does it make a difference if you're talking about the forward reaction or the backward? Exo, endo, does that make a difference? No, it doesn't. It's all connected to the collision theory, right? So what will happen if the concentration of CCl4 is increased? What would happen to the rate of forward reaction? Even if he had said what would happen to the rate of reverse reaction, you literally ignore this thing. Forward reaction, backward reaction, rate is dependent on collision theory. And if you increase the concentration, what's going to happen? If I increase the concentration, what's going to happen? Increase in concentration of CCl4 would mean more particles of CCl4. I've written the exact same, I've given you the exact same explanations in your, in the live classes. So more particles of CCl4 per unit volume, yeah? More particles of CCl4 per unit volume, which would mean what? Frequency of collisions increases or decreases? More frequent collision, right? So frequency of collisions increases. And what should happen to the total effective collisions? Obviously, total effective collisions increases. There's nothing new. And see, here he's not saying the rate of reaction increases. He's here 1 mark. Why is this a 3-mark question? 1 mark for this, 1 mark for this beauty right here. And what's the 3rd mark for? The 3rd mark is state what happens. You have to also tell the examiner, okay, what happens to the rate of reaction? So what happens when you increase the concentration? State what happens. Come on, you dumbo jumbos, what happens? So rate of reaction should increase, yes. Therefore, rate of reaction. And you could say the frequency of collisions increases between what and what? Between what? If you want to be more precise, you could say the frequency of collisions increases between what and what? What two things are colliding? Which collisions will increase? The frequency of collisions would increase between, if you want to, aim for that beautiful distinction, you could say the frequency of collisions would increase between CCl4 and H2O particles. Done? But if you get confused, there's no need to write this. This doesn't have any marks. But okay, good stuff. आगे बढ़े, आगे बढ़े, आगे बढ़े. आया, आसान है कि मुश्किल है? Rate of reaction से हम ही बच्चे डर रहे हैं. The question is about nitrogen and some of its compounds. Ammonia is converted into nitric acid, blah, blah, blah. Nobody gives a shit, right? Why? Because he's saying complete table 3.1 using the words increases, decreases, or no change. What would happen to the rate of forward reaction? Acha, what would happen to the rate of forward reaction, backward reaction, endo reaction, exo reaction, whatever is written? What would happen to the rate if you decrease the temperature, if you decrease the pressure? Come on. What would happen to the rate if you decrease the pressure? The rate is obviously going to decrease. Obviously, it's going to decrease. Why? Now, what's the why behind it? Because decreasing pressure would mean, sorry, why is my writing becoming pathetic day by day? Decreasing pressure would mean, imagine a piston, right? Whenever you talk about pressure, imagine like, a piston or a syringe or, oh, what is this BS? Sorry, guys. Imagine this. So if this was the pressure before, if this was the pressure before, particles were closer together and therefore frequency of collisions was high. But now if you've decreased the pressure, you've pushed the piston outwards, what's going to happen? Now the particles are going to be closer together or further apart? Now particles are further apart, which would mean the frequency of collisions decreases or increases. So why is the rate of reaction decreasing? Because when you're decreasing the pressure, because write the because for practice. So particles move closer together, further apart. Further apart. Do you need to write this here? No, it's to revise concepts. Remember, the purpose of past papers is not, and I repeat, it's not to boast for yourself that, oh, I'm so good. It's to revise your concepts. So why does it decrease? To why does it decrease, everybody? हाँ जी, बताएं, why does it decrease? Come on. Why does it decrease? Particles move further apart, and therefore, therefore, what should happen to the collisions? The frequency of collisions decreases, and therefore the total effective collisions decreases, or the total successful collisions decreases, and therefore rate of reaction decreases. Oh, Ramin, this is not good, kiddo, yaar. This is no, 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 no. Ramin, see, this is what you need to be very careful of. I have never used the word no more effective collisions or no more frequent collisions. There'll still be frequent collisions, but it won't be as frequent as it was before. That's why the rate is decreasing. This is such a barik line, kiddo. You have to be very careful. Apne se terneriyan nahi mani, please. Apne se no more. If you write no more frequent collisions, 0 marks. Because the examiner is going to say, what the hell, man? It's not no more, it just reduces. ऐसा नहीं है ना कि कोई frequent, फिर तो reaction ही नहीं हो ना. Because for a reaction to take place, there must be successful collisions. EA पढ़ाया था और क्लास में इसका मजाक कर रहा हूँ. But please be careful, be very careful. अपने से हाँ, you could write less frequent collisions, lower frequent collisions, frequency of collisions. बेटा कम हो गए और उसमें बड़ा फर्क है ना. कम हो गए फ्रीक्वेंसी एंड नो मोर में आसमान जमीन का फर्क है. नो मोर का मतलब है ही नहीं. मतलब चिल करें, चिल करें, चिल करें. अच्छा, ये 4 मार्क का क्वेश्चन नहीं है. ये असल में 2 टेबल्स थे. एक टेबल रिवर्सिबल रिएक्शन, ये मैंने इसलिए, माय पास्ट पेपर्स आर द बेस्ट बिकॉज दे आर वेरी वेरी चैप्टर फोकस्ड, राइट. तो इसमें वो जो 3 मार्क था वो इधर रिवर्सिबल रिएक्शन से पर्टेन करता था, तो वो उस चैप्टर में. दैट्स व्हाई आई एम द बेस्ट. ओके, डिक्रीजिंग द टेम्परेचर कॉजेज द रेट ऑफ फॉरवर्ड रिएक्शन. अच्छा, अगर इधर लिखता, खुदा ना खास्ता इधर लिखता रेट ऑफ रिवर्स रिएक्शन और रेट ऑफ बैकवर्ड रिएक्शन, देन व्हाट? If the examiner had written rate of backward reaction, then what? Then obviously the decreasing the pressure would increase the rate of reaction, right? Yes. गलत आवाज देना है. I am gonna गलत आवाज देना है. Yesterday I focused so much on this, I stressed so much on this, that it does not matter backward or forward, or even at the start of this class, it does not matter whether it's forward, backward. Rate is not dictated by the reversible bit. Rate is dictated by the collision theory. By forward reaction or backward reaction or asman reaction or zameen reaction, if you decrease the pressure, the rate is going to decrease. Be it the forward reaction, the backward reaction, it has nothing to do with this reversible sign. Please, I've explained this in the last few classes so many times, or Nale classes. Acha ji. Decreasing the temperature causes the rate of forward reaction to decrease. Acha, decreasing the temperature causes the rate of forward reaction to decrease. Acha, mera ek sawal hai, what if this was backward? Then decreasing the temperature would result in the backward reactions rate increasing. It would be the same thing, because pressure and rate are a story which is a different, they're a different story. They're all linked to collision theory. They do not care whether it's forward reaction, backward reaction. If you're decreasing the temperature, the rate is going to decrease. Why? Because decreasing the temperature, and I believe that's the question, right? So why the rate is slower when you decrease? Because decreasing the temperature means there's decrease in kinetic energy of particles. What happens to the particles? Which would result in decrease in frequency, decrease in kinetic energy of particles, so the frequency, therefore the frequency of collisions decreases. But see, it's a 3-mark question. And remember, I told you that no teacher, or almost very few teachers, teach this, that there's not just the frequency of collision that's decreases, there's also something else. Temperature is very crucial. That's why you have 3 marks for it. 1 mark is for saying, hey, the frequency of collisions is decreasing, and 1 mark is for something else too. What happens to the energy? Remember the energy. Come on. The frequency of collisions is decreasing, and what about the energy? What about the energy? Now, fewer particles have energy, or fewer percentage of particles have energy equal to or greater than the EA. ये लिखना है, इसका एक मार्क है यार. Equal to, and I've explained this in so much detail, equal to or greater than the EA, and due to which the total effective collisions decrease. Do I have to write and thus rate of reaction decreases? Do I have to write this? Is this a meticulation system? Is this a meticulation system? Achha, frequency of collisions between what decreases? If you want to be more specific, you could say frequency of collisions between particles, right? So if you want to, just be a little more chill about it. So between particles decreases. So please, this literally 1 mark is for this, 1 mark is for this, 1 mark is for this. Literally, I'm not even joking. Not even joking. And those students who think that they can get away without writing this, you're mistaken. Okay, and I've explained the concept behind this fewer energy. I hope you remember it. Okay, the Haber process is used to manufacture ammonia, yeah? N2 plus H2, blah, 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 blah. If what is the effect on forward reaction, backward reaction, asman, zameen, whatever, what's the effect if you decrease the pressure on rate of reaction? Remember, don't be confused. I'm saying this time and time again. It doesn't matter, be it forward, backward, asman, zameen, north, south, east, west, whatever type of reaction it is. If you decrease the pressure, what's going to happen to the rate of reaction? The rate of reaction is going to decrease. And why is it going to decrease? We already went over it, because the particles are now going to move further apart, and therefore the frequency of collisions decreases. And if the frequency of collision decreases, the total effective or the total successful collisions decreases. So now you know that Gucci stuff, right? You want me to write it? Let's just copy it from here. चल के तुझे मैं लेके चलूं. I am so awesome, awesome. Is there? Do you guys are you guys actually getting it, or are you just writing the answers and be like, oh, sir is going over it. We'll go over it some other day. I hope everybody is enjoying this. If you've taken the lectures, and you've jotted down stuff, this should be a piece of cake for each and every one of you. Mariam is saying, yeah, 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 yeah. Okay. Explain in terms of collision. And look at this. Look at this. I just have one question. इस पूरे में हम कब से क्वेश्चन करते आ रहे हैं? Is there something which is out of the course? No. This question, 1,000,000,000% this question is going to come in your exam, because it's an instructed course. It's very easy to score full marks in your chemistry theory paper, MCQ paper, and ATP paper. I will make sure you score full marks. You just need to practice with me. That's it. Because literally nothing is different. Nothing. Look at this. I wrote this answer here. I'm writing this answer here. Again, explain in terms of collision theory why increasing the temperature increases the rate of reaction. Because if you increase the temperature again, it's opposite to what we wrote above. Increasing in the kinetic energy of particles, which would mean that the frequency of collisions increases or decreases. Frequency of collisions. And I need to work on my handwriting. Frequency of collisions increases. And what should happen to the total effect? What should happen when the frequency of collision increases? There's two things that happens. Remember, don't forget about the second impact. So frequency of collisions increases, and now more particles have energy equal to or greater than the EA. More particles have energy equal to or greater than the EA, which would mean more successful collisions, right? Greater than the EA. And if EA आपने नहीं लिखना, तो activation energy लिख लीजिएगा, to be on the safer side. EA is also fine, but write activation energy, okay? And then what should happen to the total successful collisions? Therefore, the total successful collisions or effective collisions. I'm writing successful sometimes, I'm writing effective because I want to make sure that they're the same thing. So total successful collisions increases. I've proven this mathematically, if you guys don't remember. यार मैं अपनी शक्ल तो देखता जाऊं ना, अपने आप को देखने में बड़ा मजा है. अच्छा, वैसे मजे की बात है, ये जो है ना, ये इनका बंदा गला दबा दे, ये जो क्लास में नहीं बैठते ना. वी हैव सो मेनी स्टूडेंट्स इन द क्लास, एंड वेयर आर ऑल द गाइस? लिटरली कोई, ये जो है ना, खुदाई कसम, इनका स्टार ना है ना, इनका स्टार ना, मैंने इनका गला दबा देना है. स्टार क्या, डिस्टिंक्शन इनका ना है ना, मैंने इनका गला दबा देना है. मतलब ये वीकेंड पे मौज मस्ती, ये जानू मानू शोना टोना इनका शुरू होता है. बंदा क्या कहे यार, पेपर्स आ गए हैं, अब तो कर लो भाई, मेरे लिए डिस्टिंक्शन ले लो कसम से. आई विल गिव यू 25,000 रुपीज इफ यू स्कोर अ डिस्टिंक्शन. आई गिव, पिछले सेशन में यार मेरा क्या कहूँ, 12 मार्क्स से बच्चा रह गया डिस्टिंक्शन से. 12 मार्क्स मैन, 12 मार्क्स, लाइक 12 फ्रिकिंग मार्क्स. इस दफा मैंने लानी है यार, डबल डिजिट करना है. 25,000 रुपीज पक्का, 25,000 रुपए ले ले मेरे से, लमसम, 25,000, please. And it's all about practice, literally. And practicing with the right concepts and writing the right answers to it. अपने से टर्नेलियां नहीं मारनी. अच्छा, this question is about metals. Okay, no shit, Sherlock. Fine. It's about metal. State how a catalyst increases the rate of reaction. How does a catalyst increase the rate of reaction? Bole hanji. It lowers the activation energy, doesn't it? Lowers the activation energy. Yeah. By lowering the activation energy of what? By lowering the activation energy of what? By lowering the activation energy of what? Of मेरा सर? पूरी बात किया करें. Of what? Of the reaction. Oh, of the reaction. Reaction की activation energy कम करें. अच्छा, अगर ऑफ द रिएक्शन की दिमाग में नहीं आ रहा, जरूरी नहीं कुछ लिखें, बस इट लोड्स द एक्टिवेशन एनर्जी लिख लें, लेकिन ऑफ द रिएक्शन लिख लेना. किस चीज का? रिएक्शन का. है. अच्छा, कंप्लीट द इक्वेशन. नोबडी केयर्स. यू लर्न टू कंप्लीट दिस इक्वेशन. ये फर्स्ट एडिशन है ना, थोड़ा सा मिक्सअप है. अच्छा, गोली मारें इसको. इट सेज अ स्टूडेंट इन्वेस्टिगेट्स दैट द रेट ऑफ, फॉरगेट अबाउट दीस स्टेट सिंबल्स, यू लर्न दिस इन एसिड बेसिस एंड सॉल्ट्स. नाउ सेज अ स्टूडेंट इन्वेस्टिगेट्स द रेट ऑफ the reaction of small pieces of zinc with dilute hydrochloric acid at 25 degrees Celsius, and acid is in excess. This is such a beautiful question. Such a beautiful question. Acid is in excess. If the acid is in excess and you increase the concentration of acid, will it have any impact on the amount of volume of hydrogen formed? Would it have any impact on the volume of hydrogen formed? If acid is in excess and you increase the acid's concentration, it's in excess. Remember, you calculate the amount of products with the limiting reactant or the excess reactant. Moles in stoichiometry, you calculate products with the limiting reactant or the excess reactant. Obviously with the limiting reactant, right? I tell you guys, you have to make a house, and in order to make one house, you need 2 bricks and 1 tissue paper, right? And now I say you have 1 billion bricks, but you only have 1 tissue paper. Obviously, you can only make one house, right? Because you need to calculate the products with the limiting reactant. The tissue paper is going to finish. You can't make a house, right? So you need to understand, if the acid is in excess and you increase the concentration of acid, the graph would look something like this. Because although it'll increase the rate of reaction, but it's not going to affect the amount of products produced, right? You have to make a better curve than this. My curve, forget my curve, but you have to make it better, because obviously I'm not going to be the one giving the paper. So you guys have to make it like so, try to make it, like this. But make sure it's one smooth curve. Don't let the examiner get an idea that it's, you've broken it. Examiner says break lines, मुझे नहीं अच्छी लगती, एक smooth curve. Now, मेरी तो मजबूरी है, लेकिन you have to make one smooth curve like this. Yeah, just make sure. So this is how it will look like if you increase the concentration of acid and it's in excess, right? Because increased concentration obviously increases the. But what if the acid was limiting? This, I've stressed on this so many times. You have to be very careful. What if I say the acid is limiting and now you increase the concentration of acid? Now the acid is limiting, you've increased the concentration of acid. So increasing concentration would increase the rate of reaction, but the acid is limiting. That means that now the products that are going to form are also going to increase. Why are the products form going to increase? Because if you increase the concentration, that would mean you have more moles of hydrochloric acid. And if you use stoichiometry, more moles of hydrochloric acid would mean that now you're going to get more moles of hydrogen gas, and more moles of hydrogen gas would mean that you're going to get more volume of hydrogen gas. So remember, you have to be very cautious about it. Teachers don't show you the difference between the two, but now you know. I hope you know. But this is not the question. Now it's limiting, right? In this case, so it's fine. अच्छा देखिए, यही मकसद है मेरा सवाल करने से. ये मकसद नहीं कि मैं अपनी आपको नॉलेज दिखाऊं और सवाल करता जाऊं. ये है कि आपके कॉन्सेप्ट्स रिवाइज कराऊं. ओके. Now it says deduce the time taken from beginning of the experiment to collect 39 centimeter cube of hydrogen gas. Now, how much does it take 39? How much time did it take for 39 centimeter cube of hydrogen gas to collect? So if you go here, you put a point here and you come all the way here. So that's 150 seconds, right? You use a ruler for it. 150 seconds. True that? Know that. True that? Know that. ट्रू है कि गलत है? ट्रू है कि गलत है? ट्रू है कि गलत है? सही कर रहा हूँ, गलत कर रहा हूँ, सही कर रहा हूँ, सही कर रहा हूँ. अच्छा, एक और बात है. This is a 1 mark question. See, I am telling you so many different things and you just need to keep your brain open. What if it said deduce की जगह it said deduce and show on the graph. Use the graph. Or it said deduce की जगह it says use the graph and show on the graph. This is what he does in the experiment. use the graph, show on the graph, blah, 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 blah. Why does he do that? And he doesn't give you 1 mark for it. He gives you 2 marks. Do you know what you'll get? You'll only get 1 mark. But if you're me, you know that use the graph means, or show on the graph means, that you have to draw these construction lines. Remember, ये dotted lines draw करने हैं 39 centimeter cube पे जाके dotted lines बनाने और उसको फिर tally करना है with 150. Why? Because these dotted lines are your working that you show the examiner. These are called construction lines, which are not part of the graph, but you use it as reference points to tell the examiner the marks. So in the ATP, he gives you this question for 2 marks because he says show on the graph the time it use the graph and show on it subsequently the time it takes. So you have to show it. So even if you write 150, you're going to get 1 mark because 1 mark is for you to show it, these dotted lines. So always draw these dotted lines, right? But here it's deduce, it's a 1 mark question, doesn't make a difference. Done, sir. Are you guys getting all the different ideas? बेटा मैं इस खेल का मैं चीता खिलाड़ी हूँ, पिछले जमाने का पुराना पापी हूँ. अच्छा, the student repeats the experiment using dilute hydrochloric acid with a higher concentration. मुझे एक बात बताएं, if it's at a higher concentration, would the products increase or decrease? Would the products increase or decrease? Would it remain the same? Would the volume of hydrogen gas increase, decrease, or remain the same? Remember, above he's written it's not limiting. Above he is written it's excess. ऊपर उस मनहूस ने लिखा है कि excess है. So the products would remain the same. Why? Because the zinc is going to finish. So once the zinc finishes, it doesn't matter how many moles of hydrochloric acid you have in excess. No more products are going to form. Done. So this is all the other conditions are the same. Draw a line on the grid in figure 3.1 to show how the volume of hydrogen changes when dilute hydrochloric acid with higher concentration. So with higher concentration, the volume of hydrogen produced is going to remain the same. The volume of hydrogen produced is going to remain the same. Right here. आपने ऐसे करके बनाना. मैं थोड़ा बेहतर बनाता हूँ लेकिन ऐसे करके बनाना. Right? So the volume of hydrogen gas produced is the same. Just make sure that your hands aren't that shaky. तो pencil से, please do not draw with a pen. Please do not draw with a pen. Draw with a pencil. Draw with a pencil. Teachers बकवास करते हैं, गलत कहते हैं if they tell you that you can't use a pencil in the exam. No, you can absolutely use a pencil in the exam. It's just that you have to use the right pencil. तो वो लिखा होता है, अगर आप किसी भी ईयरली पेपर को खोल के देखते हैं उस पर लिखा होता है 2B pencil, HB के पता नहीं HB pencil चाहिए कि 2B. So you please use whenever you're making graphs or diagrams, use a pencil. Don't use a pen. Teachers फजूल बात कर रहे हैं. देखिए मैं हमेशा ग्राफ ऐसे बनाता था. मैं बहुत I would be very sneaky about it. Does it look like it's a different line? Does it look like it's a different line? No, it's not. It does not look like the line is broken. So you have to be sneaky about it a little. So just draw. The examiner says the student must draw one smooth curve, right? But we know that our hands are very shaky. So you could draw a smooth curve, but where it gets a little shaky, you could draw. But remember, ruler के साथ ना इतना भी ruler नहीं करना कि वो पता लगे कि बिल्कुल ही ruler है, right? So just make one smooth curve. Done? And you're gonna they're not that strict about it, so don't worry. ये A level का paper नहीं है. A level में थोड़े ज़्यादा हरामी, थोड़े ज़्यादा strict हो जाते हैं. So why is it a 2 mark question? One is to show that increasing the concentration increases the rate. Look, the rate is greater for the above one, right? So one is to show that increase the concentration increases the rate, and the other mark is to show that the volume of hydrogen produced is going to be the same. Why? Because the acid was in excess. खत्म. अच्छा, एक और बात है, ये कौन सा पार्ट है? ये पार्ट 2 है. तो आपने इसके ऊपर लिख लेना है ना पार्ट 2. मर्जी है, लिखने नहीं लिखना ना लिखे, मर्जी है आपकी अपनी. जस्ट डोंट फॉरगेट टू आंसर इट. डन. आसान है, मुश्किल है गाइस? इज इट इजी, इज इट डिफिकल्ट? नस्वार खान कौन है यार? नस्वार खान कौन है? उस नस्वार खान. खत्म एवरीबॉडी. अब बताएं क्या है मुश्किल, क्या है? मतलब इस पेपर में सब कुछ रिपीट है यार, खुदा की कसम. ये देखें, ऑल अदर कंडीशंस रिमेन. डिस्क्राइब एंड एक्सप्लेन यूजिंग कोलिजन थ्योरी हाउ रेट ऑफ रिएक्शन डिफर्स. हाउ डज इट डिफर? इसने आपको ये नहीं बताया इंक्रीज या डिक्रीज. इसने ये नहीं बताया इंक्रीज या, इट सेज हाउ डज इट डिफर व्हेन a temperature of 30 degrees Celsius is used. Now look at this. Initially, what was the temperature used? 25 degrees Celsius. Now it's 30. So what have you done? You've increased the temperature, decreased the temperature. Increase the temperature, decrease the temperature. Come on. You've increased the temperature. So what am I going to say? Increase in the temperature means now there'll be an increase in kinetic energy of particles. Frequency of collisions increases. देखिए टेम्परेचर उसका फेवरेट पॉइंट है वैसे. Frequency of collisions increases, and what would happen to the proportion of particles? What would happen to the proportion of particles? More particles or more percentage of particles, proportion or percentage. It's your choice. More percentage of particles. Remember, energy does two things, frequency and more percentage of particles have energy equal to or greater than the EA, and thus the total effective collisions increase. Would I get 2 marks on this, or would I only get 1 mark? 2 marks or 1 mark? Come on. I need to give you guys a breakup of the marks so you have it in mark. Yes, Mariam is saying one. Why one? Why one? Why not two? Isn't this the answer? Isn't this the answer? It is the answer. Why am I not getting 2 marks for it? Why am I only getting one? I've written such a detailed answer for him. Why am I not getting 2 marks? Because I have not mentioned anything. See, he's not saying that describe and explain why the rate increasing. He's saying how does it differ? So you also have to mention the difference. How does it differ? The rate of reaction increases. Thus, now you get it. Now you get how the marks work. Achha, one more beauty. How many marks is this question for? It's a 2 mark question. 1 mark definitely for this because he's asking you how does it differ. And then 1 mark is for this or this. A maze ki baat hai. Why did students not perform so well in the 2023 3 mark question? Why? Do you know why? Because in the 2023 3 mark question, the examiners found out that teachers were not teaching this point. They were only telling them the frequency of. Do you know why were the teachers not teaching this point? Because they didn't even know this, and some of them had conceptual, blurriness, and they also knew that the question is for 2 marks. Even those who knew this did not want to, use their brains and try to impart it in the students' brain because they're like, yeah, it's a difficult concept. Why tell the students? Because the question comes for 2 marks. So 1 mark they get for this, 1 mark they get for this. Lihaza, don't even teach this to the students. But I've never done this. I've taught you the concept, even if it's a little complicated, and I've broken it down for you guys. So those of you who don't remember this concept, go over the rate of reaction questions, right? I talked about the EA and how reactions take place in the entire universe and blah, 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 blah. Okay, moving on. Again, see, even here, the hydrochloric acid is in excess. See, now, at this point, you're going to get fed up of doing these questions. Why? What's the difference? Look at all the years. खुदा की कसम अगर ना ये क्या है? It's the same thing over and over. That's why I don't like Cambridge anymore. It's more of past paper testing rather than your knowledge testing. But those of you who learn past papers, they then, they then get destroyed, not in A levels. In A levels, you'll also gonna, even if you do past papers and learn stuff, that I did it for physics. I did the entire A2 physics in 7 days. I learn definitions and I worked my way. I got an A star, right? So A levels, but later on in life, you're gonna, you're gonna feel that you lack conceptually in things and you're never going to use your brain. So it's better to start using your brain from O levels. And see, we're doing practice, but you need to understand that practice along with concepts. Don't just do blind practice, because I want you guys to score distinctions and I also want you guys to score definite A stars. So there are a few questions in the exam which would differentiate between an A star student and an A student, or a distinction student or an A star student, and they are totally conceptually based. Sir, why did you choose to become chemistry teacher and why not for other subjects? Because I only love chemistry. Okay, calcium carbonate solid hai, ye aqueous hai, ye liquid hai, ye gas hai. Sir, why don't we know this? Because you learned this in acid bases and salts. Okay. He's saying a student investigates the rate of reaction using large pieces of calcium carbonate. So it's large. Okay. Now it says reduce the volume of carbon dioxide released after 40 seconds. So what am I going to do? At 40 seconds, draw construction lines using the ruler and then draw this beauty right here and then check it out. 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35, 36, 37, 38, 39, 40. Boom shakala. So 30, 31, 32, 33, 34. Done. Not 54, 34. Bhai, kya ho gaya? Mariam, kya ho gaya? Mariam. MB, my bad. The student repeats the experiment using the same mass of smaller pieces of calcium carbonate. So if the pieces are smaller, what would that mean? If the pieces are smaller, you now know that you've increased the surface area. Increasing the surface area means more particles are exposed to the acid, and therefore the frequency of collisions increases. See, follow step by step. The examiner wants the answer also in step by step. So always don't jump to conclusions directly. Kya hota hai? Increase in surface area means more. See, this is what you guys skip. You say increase in surface area, rate of reaction increases. You skip the in-between bit. You say increase in surface area, frequency of collision increases, rate of reaction. What about the middle bit when you talk about particles? Increase in surface area means more particles are exposed. You need to write this line. Increase in concentration means more particles per unit volume. You need to include this line. Increase in temperature means the kinetic energy increases. You need to involve this line. So please don't skip points. Don't skip the steps. Right? Don't skip the mechanisms of things. So if you use smaller, achha, why has he written same mass? My question. रट्टे नहीं मारने होते ना. Why has he written say? What if the student said the student repeats the experiment using the same mass of smaller pieces? What if he said using a higher mass or a greater mass of smaller pieces? Then what would happen? सोचे ना, कभी कभी सोचा है क्या, बारिश क्यों बाए. Come on, सोचे. Don't just rote learn things. If he uses a higher mass and smaller pieces has a total different impact. You know, smaller pieces means that you've increased the surface area. Increase in surface area means that more particles will be exposed per unit volume to the acid. More particles are exposed to the acid particles. And what will happen? The frequency of collisions increases and the rate of reaction would increase. But if you have increased the mass as well, you realize that the product is calculated with the help of the limiting reactant. And assuming that even if you increase the mass, the limiting reactant is still calcium carbonate, you'll realize that if you've increased the mass of the moles of calcium carbonate are going to increase. And if the moles are going to increase, the moles of carbon dioxide produced would also increase. And if the moles of carbon dioxide produced are going to increase, the volume of carbon dioxide produced are going to increase. So if you change the amounts, obviously the rate is going to increase because you've increased the what's it called, you've effectively increased the surface area. So rate is obviously going to increase, but now the products produced are also going to increase. My bad for the pathetic curve. The products produced, let me just fix this. The products produced are also going to increase. Why the products to ratta na mara kare, why the products produced going to increase? Why? Because you realize that if you've used a higher mass, that would mean that you're going to get more moles of calcium carbonate. Remember, if you have, let's suppose I went from 20 grams of calcium carbonate from using 20 grams to using 80 grams. So if you calculate the moles of this mass equal mole times molar mass, you're going to get more moles of calcium carbonate. And if you have more moles of calcium carbonate, when you use the equation, you're going to end up with more moles of carbon dioxide. And if you get more moles of carbon dioxide, what's going to happen to the volume of carbon dioxide? V is equal to N times 24, right? So if more moles of carbon dioxide would mean more volume of carbon dioxide. So start linking things in your brain. Makes sense, everybody? I hope you get the gist. So सिर्फ ये ना देखिए और aspects भी सोचा करें. Think about different aspects. You know, teachers, what they do is they just read the question and they've learned the marking scheme and they just start writing the marking. But give the students alternatives. What if this was like this? What if this was like this? What if this was like this? So you need to understand and think, start thinking like a science student. Okay, but it's the same mass. So you realize that it says draw a line on the grid to show how the volume of carbon dioxide changes. So how does it change? Because if all the mass and everything else is the same, I now know that the volume of carbon dioxide produced, sorry for my pathetic curve. You get the point, you get the gist of it, but hey, we're still gonna work our way through it. Oh, so behuda, ganda. That's why I don't like this chapter. I love this chapter, but like, I hate drawing the graph. So what I do is, because I'm using an iPad, what I do is I first draw this and then I make this here. Oh, I need to go a little up. Chalo dildar chalo. It's gonna be the death of me. This is gonna be the death of me. Oh my God. I'll say you. Sounds good? Looks good? Looks beauty? Looks beauty? Part 2. खत्म. आगे बढ़ूं. Did you guys get the higher mass concept? I hope you did. Describe and explain using collision theory how the rate of reaction. How? इसका मतलब है एक मार्क तो किसका होगा? एक मार्क किसका होगा? अरे शाबाश. How the rate of, so if you do it at 20 degrees Celsius, what were you doing at it before? What temperature were you using? You were using 25 before. So now you've decreased the temperature. What would mean if you use it at 20, this would decrease the kinetic energy of particles and the frequency of collisions decreases. अच्छा इसमें ना आपकी मर्जी है सिर्फ frequency of collisions decrease करके rate की बात करें because it's a 2 mark question आपकी मर्जी है. तो फिर बड़ा I'd recommend पूरी बात लेंगे. Frequency of collisions decreases and now even if you don't write this because it's a 2 mark question, but I'll still write it. So now fewer particles have energy equal to or greater than the EA. Remember, this is only for temperature. Fewer particles have energy or fewer percentage or proportion of particles have EA, have energy greater or equal to EA. And therefore total effective collisions decreases if collisions decreases and therefore rate of reaction decreases. Why? Because now he said how बस सर सबर एक बस नहीं ट्रक एक और सवाल करूं एक और ये देखें ये कितना मजे का लग रहा है ओहो बच्चे कहेंगे कितना मुश्किल. A sample of carbon dioxide is put into a gas syringe. The end of the syringe is then blocked so that no gas can escape. This is from states of matter. This is chapter number 1. ये states of matter का सवाल ये उधर हमने किया भी है chapter 1. ये chapter 1 का सवाल है. It says explain using kinetic theory why increasing the pressure in the gas syringe decreases the volume of gas. We've done this in chapter 1. If you increase the pressure, what's going to happen? The gas particles, talk about the particles. What happens to the particles? Increasing pressure means, why does the volume decrease? Because as physicists, we know that if you increase the pressure, it is inversely proportional to volume. So volume is going to decrease 0 mark. Because you're saying, I don't want the physics relationships. Tell me what happens to the particles when you increase the pressure. Come on, अब तो दिमाग सोचे ना सोचे सिरिंज है प्रेशर बढ़ाया पार्टिकल्स को क्या हुआ मनहूस पार्टिकल्स क्या कर जाते हैं सोचे सोचे दिमाग पे जोर डाले ऐसे ऐसे करके दिमाग को ऐसे जोर दे पार्टिकल्स अगर सिरिंज है जोर दूं तो पार्टिकल्स क्या हो जाएंगे दूर जाएंगे करीब आएंगे थैंक यू सो इंक्रीज द प्रेशर मींस दैट particles are pushed closer together particles move closer together or are pushed or move closer together. The key term is closer together. Push लिख लें, move लिख लें, जो मर्जी लिखें. Together. And thus the volume decreases. इसमें rate of reaction की बाबा बातें ना लिखें. सिंपल बात पूछ रहा है प्रेशर बढ़ाने से हाँ अगर ये कहता है प्रेशर बढ़ाने से वॉल्यूम क्यों कम होता है और रेट क्यों कम होता है सो द वॉल्यूम इंक्रीजिंग द प्रेशर. देखिए बच्चे सवाल नहीं कॉम्प्रिहेंड कर पाते दो अब व्हाट इफ द एग्जामिनर आस्क्ड if you increase the pressure what happens to the volume describe and explain in terms of kinetic particle theory and what happens to the rate describe and explain in terms of अब बच्चे क्या कहेंगे एक पार्ट आंसर कर लेंगे दूसरा छोड़ देंगे सवाल को पढ़ना है why because what happens to the volume the particles move closer together and the volume decreases 2 marks for this if this question were to come it will come for 4 marks so 2 marks for this and then what happens to the rates since the particles move closer together the frequency of collisions increases and the total effective collision and the rate of reaction increases. So then you'll get 4 marks. So please read the question carefully. Answer whatever is asked in the question in however manner it's asked. What is meaning of the term catalyst? What is meaning of the term catalyst? क्या मनहूस चीज है catalyst? बताएं शाबाश. हाँ, catalyst is a chemical substance or a substance कह दे जो मर्जी कह दे. A chemical substance. Can you guys, is it writing on the screen? Okay, something's wrong with my good notes. So it's a chemical substance that speeds or that increases the rate of reaction or that speeds up की जगह that increases कर देते हैं. That increases rate of reaction. How does it do that? By lowering the EA and without getting used up. Done. खत्म. देखिए इधर मेरे उसमें ना शो नहीं हो रहा असल में ये जरा मैं स्क्रीन से देखूं थोड़ा इसको ये इधर मेरे में गंद मची हुई है. What lowers the temperature or pressure? इसकी मार्क्स डिस्ट्रीब्यूशन कैसी है इसकी मार्क डिस्ट्रीब्यूशन a chemical spreading that speeds up the rate of reaction एक मार्क ये है speeds up the rate of reaction increases the rate of reaction और दूसरा मार्क क्या है lowering the EA. ये तो तीसरा पॉइंट मैंने आई शुगल में लिख ली है. और ये खुद डिस्ट्रीब्यूशन, अच्छा मेरा गुड नोट्स ना, अगर मैं आपको तस्वीर दिखाऊं उसमें सब कुछ ऐसे आपके स्क्रीन पे सही नजर आ रहा है, मेरे लिए सब कुछ ऐसे टूटा फूटा हो गया। नोशन भी कह रहा है बस कर दे, गुड नोट्स भी कह रहे हैं बस कर दे। अच्छा, सवाल पढ़ना बहुत जरूरी है। सी, शुरू से सवाल पढ़ा करें। ऑक्सीजन इज प्रोड्यूस्ड, decomposition of blah blah blah, MnO2 is a catalyst for this reaction. What is meant by a student add powdered magnesium, so the rate is going to be higher. Why is the rate going to be higher with powdered magnesium? Shabash. बस आखिरी सवाल, why is the rate going to be higher with powdered magnesium? Because powdered magnesium means increase in surface area, more particles are exposed to the acid use कर रहे हैं ना, acid use कर रहे हैं, अच्छा acid नहीं use कर रहे, चलो सही है। So more particles are gonna be exposed, more, अच्छा powdered, sorry, powdered वो है catalyst है, so more particles are gonna be exposed, more particles of the catalyst are gonna be exposed, and therefore more frequent collisions, and therefore more frequent collisions with the catalyst, and therefore the total effective collisions increase, and which would result in a greater rate of reaction. That's why he's using it in the powdered form. ऑक्साइड सर बस कर दे, मेरा नस्वार भी खत्म हो गया, बस थोड़ी थोड़ी थोड़ी। अच्छा, he's adding it to hydrogen peroxide in according to the mass of the, remember this, I've done this experiment with you, but I did it with calcium carbonate. Remember this, calcium carbonate और एसिड के साथ किया था, याद है? इसीलिए मैंने आपको एक्सपेरिमेंट्स कराए थे, so that when you guys see such questions in the theory, although you're not required to know each and every experiment, but so when you see these questions in theory, you can figure out कि अच्छा हाँ ऐसे experiment तो हमने किया था। और ये देखें, loosely fitting cotton wool plug, क्यों? To prevent the liquid from splashing out. I think, why is the mass of conical flask decreasing as the time increases? Because look at this beauty, oxygen is being produced, which is going to escape. Oxygen is a gas, it can escape through the cotton, right? So, and that's why he's even specified it for you ki loose fitting hai, loosely fitting, so that you know that oxygen can escape. There's no shock कि oxygen nahi ja sakta. So it's a gas, right? Straight, why the mass of it? Because O2 gas escapes. आप खुद सवाल पढ़ लिया करें ना बाहर। escapes what from the flask, escapes the flask from the flask, ठीक है, लिख लेता हूँ यार, लिख लेता हूँ। अच्छा, the rate of reaction is highest at the start of reaction. Why? पूछे शाबाश, why is it highest? Because at the start of reaction you have maximum amount of reactants, and therefore or maximum concentration of reactants and reactant particles, maximum concentration of reactant particles, which would mean more collisions, and more collisions, the frequency of collisions increases, and the total effective collision increases, and the rate of reaction is therefore the highest. But as the reaction takes place, the concentration of reactant particles decreases. The concentration of H2O2 in this case is going to decrease, and if it starts to decrease, what is going to happen to the frequency of collision? The frequency of collisions are going to decrease, and therefore the total effective collisions are going to, and therefore the rate of reaction is going to decrease. And when does it become zero? When all the reactants are used up, because no more collisions. Then you could say no more collisions, because if all the reactants are used up, no more collisions. Done? Okay, explain why the rate of reaction is highest at the start of reaction. Hanji, bataएं. Why? Because the conc of H2O2 particles is maximum, or is the highest, therefore highest, or you could just say highest frequency of collisions. Done. Right? Highest frequency of collisions at the start. Done, sir. Explain why the rate of reaction eventually becomes zero. Zero क्यों होता है? Specifically zero का, ये नहीं का decrease क्यों होता है? Decrease तो हमें पता है ना, reactants get used up, concentration of reactant particles decreases, and if the concentration of reactant particles decreases, that means frequency of collision decreases, and total effective collision decreases, and the rate of reaction. बस यही बातें यार, 10 दफा यही बातें, कुछ भी नहीं है। Explain why it becomes zero. Zero क्यों होता है? क्योंकि सब कुछ, all the hydrogen peroxide, क्या बोले? गूंगे बहरों बोलो। खत्म, सब कुछ खत्म, तो खत्म को अंग्रेजी में क्या कहते हैं? व्हाट डू वी से खत्म? बोलो बोलो बोलो, मुंह से आ बोलो, चीखो। What happens? Explain why that becomes zero. All the H2O2 gets used up. खत्म। और has reacted भी कह सकते हैं, gets used up, ठीक है, reacted कह सकते हैं, gets used up, or you could say has reacted or decomposed, जो मर्जी, जिद्दो मर्जी का। Done, sir. Any questions up until this point? Any questions? Sir, where are these recordings uploaded? They are not on portal. They'll be uploaded on the portal soon, but they're all available to the public for you on YouTube. So in these practice sessions, even your friends can join in. Sir, you made a hypothetical question. How do you know that the gradient is greater? So instead of saying the tangent is steeper and we calculate and write the value of gradient proof, नहीं, इतनी लंबी कहानी नहीं करेंगे, इतनी लंबी कहानी करने की तोड़ने की जरूरत नहीं है. सिर्फ इतना कह देंगे because the gradient is higher या the gradient is lower depending on it, right? तो ये जो है सिंपल चीजें को रखें, सही है. So instead of saying कि वो gradient is higher, instead of saying the tangent is steeper and therefore the value of the numerator will decrease, वो आपके concept के लिए कि tangent जब tangent flat होता जाता है, the difference between y-axis decreases and therefore the numerator decreases due to which the gradient decreases. आपने सिर्फ क्या लिखना है? The gradient decreases. आपने ये पूरी कहानी नहीं ढूंढनी, वो आपका concept है. वो आपको पता है कि जितना flat होता जाएगा उतना y-axis में difference कम. देखिए ये देखिए इसी टाइम में y एक्सिस में इतना डिफरेंस है और इसी टाइम में y एक्सिस में सिर्फ इतना डिफरेंस है. सो दैट्स ओनली फॉर योर नॉलेज. यू जस्ट हैव टू से कि बिकॉज द रेट इज डिक्रीजिंग, हाउ डज द ग्राफ शो? बिकॉज द ग्रेडियंट इज लोअर. हाँ, अगर 3-4 मार्क का क्वेश्चन हो तो देन दे आर एक्सपेक्टिंग यू टू राइट बिकॉज द ग्रेडियंट इज लोअर. एंड व्हाई इज द ग्रेडियंट लोअर? बिकॉज द टेंजेंट इज फ्लैटर और लेस स्टीप. एंड व्हाई इज इट लेस? एंड इफ इट इज लेस स्टीप दैट वुड मीन द चेंज इन y एक्सिस. फिर वो कहानी तोड़ सकते हैं, बट इट्स ओनली गोना कम फॉर 1 मार्क. ठीक है? Any questions? आसान है, मुश्किल है? Come on, guys. I need an answer. I need an honest answer. Easy or difficult? Come on. I need an honest answer. अब आसान लग रहे हैं, होना आसान चाहिए. कुछ भी नहीं है. मैं आपको कसम खा के कहता हूं कि इन चीजों में कुछ भी नहीं है. मुफ्त के आंसर. जिस चीज में कुछ वेरिएशन आ सकती है कैलकुलेशन के पता, वो भी मैथ्स है यार. कुछ भी नहीं है, कुछ भी नहीं है. ये तो डिटो आंसर है. वो मोल्स है. मोल्स में सिर्फ मैथ्स थोड़ी आगे पीछे आपसे हो सकती है और वो आपकी गलती होगी. आपस की बात है, लैक ऑफ प्रैक्टिस होगी. अदर देन दैट every single answer is very beautifully curated in this paper. ठीक है? तो if you guys have any other questions, tomorrow 8 p.m. class, inshallah, 8 p.m. done. Organic chemistry is the easiest, Noor. I will make sure that you guys take full marks in organic. फिर ऐसे organic chemistry में आप पेपर में पहले सवाल organic chemistry के करेंगे. आप कहेंगे वाह 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 वाह, मुफ्त की बात. ओके, चलो guys, bye bye, ciao ciao, Allah hafiz. New practice, नहीं practice session tomorrow. Tomorrow we are going to do reversible reactions. Okay, bye, ciao.